And welcome once again to the Talking Archive. My name is Josh Jacobs. Our conversation concludes now with Dave Berg, longtime producer of The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. Now, last we left off, he was discussing the moment that Conan O'Brien took over Tonight back in 2009. And Jay Leno got the 10 p.m. to 11 p.m. slot Monday through Friday on the Peacock Network.
You know, the time comes and, Conan replaces us. And Zucker had come up with this plan where we were bumped up to prime time, right, in the 10 o'clock slot, or bumped down, I guess. And we're up against shows like Lost, right, that had a budget of $4 million a week to do, per episode, right, and we had a budget of $700,000 to do 5 shows a week, and it's just. We just weren't designed to go up against shows like that. Well, anyway, so what happens is Conan takes over the show in May of 2009, and it's during the summer hiatus, so all the other shows aren't on, the Lost and all the other shows, and Conan proceeds to slip to number 2 in the ratings within 3 weeks. Within 3 weeks, after we had been number 1 longer than 15 years. And the ratings just kept getting worse. And then we came on during prime time, and we didn't do that well, which we didn't expect to do that well. We did pull in what NBC had set as our target goal. We actually hit our targets. We weren't number 1, but we hit the demos that we wanted, the demographics and everything. But we just weren't doing that well. But again, Conan turned the ratings around and went into the tank within 3 weeks, and that's on him. That's entirely on him.
Well, I'm not surprised because remember. I think Craig Ferguson debuted on CBS during the late show, the same going against Conan, and he was beating Conan O'Brien the ratings. And I thought to myself, what's NBC thinking right now? They just said that Conan's going to replace Jay Leno, yet he's coming in second place to Craig Ferguson.
It should have been a tip-off, I think.
Oh, yeah.
That should have been a tip-off. But he played hardball, and Jeff Zucker fell for it. And he ends up getting the Tonight Show slot. Well, we couldn't go on because it just wasn't working out. So NBC, Zucker tried to do a sort of a compromise where we would go on at 11:30 to midnight, and then Conan would do midnight to 1 a.m. and still it would be called the Tonight Show. Well, that wasn't good enough for him, and he was insulted at the idea. And so finally the show went back to Jay Leno. That wasn't Jay's doing. That was NBC's decision. Then Jay took the show, and within a month he had it back up to number 1 in the ratings.
And then he hosted it for the next 4 years until the 2014 Olympics. And that was his final episode. In fact, his final guest was Billy Crystal.
That's correct, yeah.
By which time you were no longer there with The Tonight Show, correct?
That's right. I had moved on. One of the things I wanted to, I was having health issues. I was suffering extreme stress because of, and I don't want to belabor.
Well, that's fine.
Woe is me, But it was very stressful to me to go through that period where we were number 1. The NBC executives never messed with us. It was a very tight run ship. We were very close. But then during that period where we were in prime time, all of a sudden all these NBC executives were showing up, telling us what to do, and telling us something different every day, what we should be doing. And it was just a really difficult time. So after that, I had decided, you know what, I want to write a book about my experience at The Tonight Show anyway. So I had moved on by that time. Yeah.
And you also became a consultant with Frank Pastore's show on 99.5 KKLA radio. How did you get in contact with Frank, by the way?
Well, I was a big fan, for starters. I listened to Frank's show. And secondly, I met him. He gave a talk where I live in Santa Clarita, California. He gave a talk at a school, Trinity High School. And I had reached out and said that I'm a big fan of Frank. I reached the station and said, if he's available after his talk, I would love to talk to Frank. And so, sure enough, after his talk, he said, is Dave Berg here? I want to talk to him. So I went up to talk to him. And Frank, you know, as great a guy as he is, he could be very blunt.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, you know, I'm a big fan of yours. I got to tell you, Frank, you know, I listen to you almost every day. And he said, well, I really appreciate that. But frankly, I'm not always a big fan of the Tonight Show. I don't like a lot of it. I don't like a lot of what you're doing. And I said, well, guess what, Frank? I don't either. And I'm doing my best to work on it. And that took him aback, you know.
Wow.
He didn't expect that answer. So one thing led to another, and then he invited me to appear on his show. Then I would give him guest ideas, and we became friends. He and Gina and Mary and I, we became friends. We would go out to dinner together. It was a wonderful friendship.
I remember he also was for those listening who don't know, he was also the world champion. He had a record. He was, in addition to being a Cincinnati Reds pitcher for about 8 years, playing with the likes of Johnny Bench and Tom Seaver and Joe Morgan and even Pete Rose. He was the state champion of the Big Texan, the home of the 72-ouncer, and he had that record for about 9.5 years until Joey Chestnut, the Nathan's Hot Dog champ, beat him in 2008. But then Chestnut got beaten in 2014 by a young lady from Nebraska who did it in even a shorter time. Frank was, after he passed away, me and Big Wave Dave were talking about these stories. And one time Frank barged his way into Dave's studio while Dave was live on The Fish. And first he was trying to get Dave's attention. Dave was having none of it because he was on the air. And so Frank just barges in the studio, doesn't even see if the on-air light is off or not. So he just barges in and yells, "It's hot as hell in here!" And then he notices that Dave's on the air with Tom Lewis from Frank's favorite charity, Cross International, and Frank says, "Oh, shoot," except he doesn't say shoot. And he dives underneath the desk, and then the mic flips off, and Tom Lewis says, "What just happened here?" And Dave's like, "I don't know, ask the man underneath the table there." So Frank just dusts himself off, doesn't say anything, just exits the studio. 20 minutes later, Dave goes into our program director, Chuck's office, and Frank's there with Chuck, and Dave's like moping like schlep rock and goes, "Gee, thanks a lot, Frank. I can't believe you. You didn't even bother to look whether we're on the air. It's, you yell, it's hot as hell, then you say shoot. My phone lines have been lining up like a Christmas tree for the last 20 minutes asking, did I hear what I just think I just heard?" And Frank's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. And Chuck's like, and Dave's just reading him the riot act for the next next minute or so. And then finally puts his hand on Frank's shoulder and says, "By the way, Frank, just kidding, pal. Nothing happened. Nobody heard anything." And Frank slams Dave to the ground and goes, "You bastard! Don't you ever do that again!" So if they made a Frank Pastore movie, they got to have that scene in there. Otherwise, it's not going to be complete.
Yeah, he was one of a kind. But he, I'm not saying he was hot-tempered, but he just sometimes did things without thinking. He just did it.
Yeah. And that did frustrate me sometimes as producer, where a guest wouldn't show up and he'd, get flustered and stuff. And so, I loved him, but that was his weakness, I think, as host, was that, and he told me he, read all the websites, from the New York Times, LA News, all the local stuff, the local stories, the headlines and stuff. So but that was one weakness. If a guest didn't show up, he'd sometimes just pull out an article and just read it verbatim on the air for the segment to fill. And so I guess looking back is like, I could have handled it better myself. I just was like, Frank, he wasn't there. What can I do? I know I could have handled it better. I'm not sure how, but that was one thing I wished I could have, handled better, to kind of ease him and comfort and be able to put the stress down. What's your advice actually in that type of situation, kind of looking back on it at all? What could I have done that would have kind of helped ease Frank, or would I have to get to really know the person before I'd be able to figure out how to do that?
I don't know what to suggest. I really don't, except if you had a few, backup guests in your pocket. Hey, we could call you anytime. Would you be available to do the show in a pinch?
That's a great
That's
idea.
the only thing, but otherwise, I don't know what to do.
No, that's actually
We dealt with that at the Tonight Show.
That's actually a great idea, because I know that Peter Marshall, in his book Backstage with the Original Hollywood Square, he said, we had the 9 stars you saw on television, but we also had 3 stars backstage and standby, just in case one of the stars had to leave or nobody showed up. And he said it worked in a pinch quite often, especially if Paul Lynde had too much to drink and he'd storm off or whatever, and we'd have a celebrity right there ready to go.
Right. I mean, that's 9 people you're putting your trust in. I mean, if you think about it, when you're doing a show and you have a guest on, you're turning over your entire show to someone that is beholden to you for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really smart. Good for them.
Yeah, and then looking at Dennis Prager, his producer Alan's been with him for, I don't know how long, very long time. And, Alan has the way to, if Dennis gets too goofy, Alan's able to pull him in, and say, okay, not too goofy. And then if Dennis is, upset, Alan's got a way of also helping Dennis calm down as well. So it's just, it's like the perfect yin and yang balance. I'm not a yin and yang guy, but, it's the perfect balance, and stuff. They gel very well together.
That is a great relationship, and I think we both know, and maybe many of your listeners know, that Dennis can easily get off track. He's interested in so many things. He can get way off track easily and quickly.
Oh, yeah, and sometimes behind the scenes after the show's over with, he's just saying some goofy things and singing some goofy songs that he's just kind of making up out of the blue. And, it's kind of like, I kind of wish that, they're recording this stuff, because it would be kind of entertaining, Dennis behind the scenes afterwards and stuff, and see what's going on. Because it's sometimes like, oh my gosh, this is pretty, funny stuff.
Well, when I did Dennis's show, and by the way, I'm a regular listener of Dennis, and I always had a secret wish that I wanted to be his producer, but again, it doesn't get any better than Alan. But I remember I went on his show, to promote my book. And he never got around to asking me anything. I don't care if he asked about the book. I was just honored to be on the show.
Mm-hmm.
But he never got around to asking me anything about what I'm an expert in and know anything about. He just started asking me about Johnny Carson.
Wow.
I said, well, okay, here's this, I would tell Johnny stories. And I said, but again, I didn't work for Johnny. But he never got off of it.
Mm.
Because that's what he wanted to know about.
Interesting. Wow.
Gotten back. If Alan had been there at the time, Dennis would have gotten back on track.
Yeah, definitely. And what was the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
That's an excellent question. Really an excellent question. I think I sort of learned it on my own.
Mm-hmm.
It's just you can't. You have to learn how to accept the word no. Mm-hmm. If you're going someplace to get a job or you're pitching an idea, you have to learn how to accept no and just keep going without taking it personally. And even more, you have to accept the notion of being told yes and then having that yes being taken away. Can't take any of it personally. You just have to keep going.
That's great advice.
For instance, I'm a songwriter, and I can't tell you how many times I've had pitched my songs to some very prominent singers in Nashville who said, because during my Tonight Show years, I knew everybody in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't tell you how many times we like this song. It's going on the album. And then the next week, oh, great, when's the album coming out? Oh, yeah, we're not doing your song. You know, but you can't get mad, right? You just have to go, oh, okay, thanks. Thanks for considering it.
Now, I didn't know that you're a songwriter too. Who are your musical influences?
Well, J.S. Bach, Leonard Cohen, Dave Brubeck.
Oh, yeah.
Flatt and Scruggs, Garth Brooks, any number of influences. The Beatles.
Oh, yeah.
But I'm in a bluegrass band these days, so
that's great.
But I also play other genres too. But anyway,
does your band have a website by chance?
Oh yeah, it's Orchard Bluegrass Band.
OrchardBluegrassBand.com.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll write that.
Thanks.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah.
If they just put in Orchard Bluegrass Band, it'll go to. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I'm always looking forward to new music. My niece is a drummer and lead singer of a rock band that has kind of a retro, late 60s to early 80s type of sounds to it. They're called Tchotchke. They're going to Europe in a couple of days. And so they've been together for about 5 years. They had a different name before that, but when they had to fire the original guitarist, the original guitarist said, well, I own the rights to the old name. So they said, well, we'll hire a new guitarist and just come up with a new name. And the new guitarist is so much better because she actually can play guitar rather than just pluck strings. And it's made a world of difference because I listened to an old video and the new one is like, oh my goodness, this is a world of difference.
Wonderful. Yeah. Anyway, just back to Orchard Bluegrass Band. If you just go put in the words Orchard Bluegrass Band on Facebook.
Okay.
We're more into the Facebook than than a website.
Okay, cool.
Anyway, thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah, I mean, it's always great to find out new talents. Now, did you ever get to book Garth Brooks on the Tonight Show?
All the time. He was our go-to show. And I had a deal. I had a little deal with Garth, which was that I told him, I asked him, advice about songwriting, and he said, whenever you have a song, give it to me first. Give me first right of refusal. And I thought, wow, this songwriting thing's going to be really easy, right? He just didn't take any of my songs, but he at least considered them.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he was a wonderful guest. Back to Garth, and he was always loyal to us. Whenever he had a new album, he would always break his album on our show.
Wow. And I remember for a while he had the alter ego Chris Gaines, and that was actually a very good album. It was, despite the fact it wasn't a commercial success, but it sounded really good.
Yeah, except it didn't go over with his fans. That's why it didn't do well. People didn't want Garth Brooks to be somebody else. I agree with you. It's an excellent album. I'm not saying that.
Oh, no.
I'm just saying it didn't go anywhere.
Kind of makes you wonder, because some bands in the past, like the Four Seasons, did a song called Don't Think Twice under the title of The Wonder Who. Of course, you could tell who it was because they still had the high-pitched voices. But, they kind of... And then the Guess Who originally was a group called Chad Allen the Expressions. And so they decided, well, we'll change the name to Guess Who for this album just to make sure that nobody knows who we are. And it paid off commercially for them. And because, of course, they had no success as Chad Allen. So that was a whole different thing as well. But it would have been interesting if Garth Brooks had just released Chris Gaines without telling people he is Chris Gaines. I wonder what would have happened had he done it that way.
Well, that's a good question. You just never know. You don't know. Like J.K. Rowling.
Mm-hmm.
When she released the book under a pen name, it never went anywhere.
Wow. Amazing.
Just don't know, right?
No. Now, in addition to your bluegrass band, what other projects do you have going on right now?
I am writing some songs for a friend of mine that's doing a Reagan biopic, a feature film about Ronald Reagan, which comes out next year. He's asked me to submit some songs for that, so I'm excited about that.
I think I've seen the, is it Mark Joseph by chance?
It's Mark Joseph. You're right.
Great guy.
Great guy. Yeah, I know you've worked with Mark, come to think of it. I know you have.
Mm-hmm. And Des Quaid is playing our 40th president in that film.
Yes, he is. And I've watched it. I've watched the rough cut several times. Does a wonderful job.
Oh, he does, yeah.
So I'm excited about that.
Well, definitely. Well, is there anything else you'd like to add to conclude the conversation?
I can't think of anything except that I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. I'm glad we got to talk and talk about your career and also with tonight and then, of course, right now with the Bluegrass Band and the Reagan biopic and much success for that film as well. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing the final product. And Dave Berg, thanks for coming on with us on the Talking. Thank you for coming with us on the Talking Archive.
Really, really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. And let's keep in touch.
Definitely. This is the Talking Archive. Again, we've been talking with Dave Berg, longtime producer of The Tonight Show with Jay Leno, as well as a producer with NBC News. And until next time, keep your mind on the things above. And as you hit that open road, don't be a slowdown spectator.